Welcome to the Equity Institute's podcast on the purpose of public education with me, Vincent Perez, your host. Today, we'll be talking with Chase Buffington. Chase is a school board member. He's also the manager at CISPS Learning Center. CISPS is special to my heart and that of my family. I've lived and worked there for nearly 10 years of my life. Chase is a steward of this place, this land base, that's so inviting for thousands of students. It has been under the care of the Association of Washington School Principals and former CCC camp. So it's got a lot of history as well as a job corps. Please welcome Chase Buffington with his perspective on outdoor school and what it means to be with the land and for our children's future. Well, Chase, thank you so much for being here on our podcast about the purpose of public education. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and your connection to public education?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually the director of the CISPS Learning Center, which is part of the Principals Association of Washington State. But I also have been serving for the last 8 years as a school board member for the Morton School District here in Lewis County.
So I think that's a pretty broad perspective, a learning center out in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. So outdoor ed perspective, but also as a school board member. I'm curious, from those viewpoints, what is the purpose of public education?
Well, I'll put on my school board hat because I think that's a pretty unique position when it comes to a community and what we do on a school board. And I think it's really vital and important to understand that school board members, our job is to oversee the fiscal responsibility of our superintendent and make sure that the delivery of our program or their classes, the different credits and so forth, that they meet the school requirements in the state of Washington. So not only are we trying to balance a budget, we're also trying to make sure that the information our students are receiving is equitable for all students. And that can be a challenge when it comes to a rural community. But we've had great success over the last 8 years. And a lot of that I give credit to having consistency. And that consistency involves having leadership at the top for long periods of time. And our superintendent is brand new when I started the school board. So he's been there for 8 years, which has helped us keep our principals in the building for long periods of time. And from that, what we have seen is a huge difference in our students' grade levels, as well as their testing scores and so on and so forth. And I think it just boils down to whatever kind of community you want to build, staying consistent within that, it builds on results from there. What happened too, for what was unique, is I came into the school board at the same time that we as a rural school district had a huge overhaul. Like, we weren't meeting any of our goals and obligations to the state. And so from that, we had a complete administration overhaul. And I've actually really enjoyed, from the moment I began to now, just seeing the progress we've made. So that's my school board hat and what I've observed from being just a tax-paying citizen in my town. Speaking of my director hat here at the CISPS Learning Center, I've been here since 2009. So I'm coming up on my 15-year anniversary of working here at CISPS. It's a completely different approach, and it kind of says a little bit to how I vision public education, is that while public education is 4 walls inside of a classroom, and there's a set specific measurement of curriculum and standards and testing and where we want to reach our credits so a student can graduate, I'm also a big believer in pushing the walls open and going into the outdoor education field. And that is also a critical component of a child's development. Big believer in 5th and 6th grade outdoor school. I'm actually the chair of the Washington Outdoor School Coalition, and I've been doing that for 6 years. I passed legislation myself with a team 2 years ago, House Bill 2078, called Outdoor School for All. And last year we sent 81,000 students, primarily 5th and 6th graders, to outdoor school in the state of Washington, which is a huge uptick from where we were at before 2019.
I meet people just around the state, and when I mentioned that I have served at CISPS Learning Center, like, eyes light up. Like, there's something tapped in the spirit of a person 20 years later that, I remember 6th grade outdoor school, we did this thing. There's something really profound and powerful about these outdoor experiences that are long lasting and impacting.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite memories, and probably why I'm in the field of outdoor education, is those were life-changing moments where you got to spend time with your peers and have those late night stories and kind of tell those secrets to one another and kind of expose our vulnerability and get down to an equal playing field at outdoor school. It definitely changed my life. It made me think to myself, there's other people out there that are like me, especially my circumstance growing up was kind of difficult. And to feel the confidence boost of others around you, the sky's the limit when you have support.
You created imagery, and I know it's not all sitting around a fire, but the imagery of sitting around a fire came to me. And I thought, what happens to us relationally around a fire versus around a whiteboard?
I always refer to fire as story time. I think for us all individually, we're writing our own personal story. Right? We're all individuals. We're writing a story, and that story has all sorts of turns and flips and stumbles along the way. That's what campfire is to me. It's a place where you can really light up the story room, expose those pieces that make you human, make your peers realize, hey, this person needs a hug, or this person needs support, or maybe we just need to have a celebration. I don't think a whiteboard. A whiteboard is definitely information driven. I would call a campfire a story time.
Thank you. So with this balance, right, this perspective of what happens for us as learners, as communities in spaces like CISPS Learning Center, and knowing that that's part of students' educational experience, and even the concept of to go out, to go in, the idea of we're going to go out to the wilderness to go into self, and there's some discovery there hand in hand. So you paint a whole picture around that. You paint a picture around school board and that kind of structural standards, compliance kind of side of the service. What have you seen really work then? Was it philosophies, approaches, frameworks in public education that help us grow all of these aspects? Is it a particular practice? Is it a particular event or policy that you can point to and say, we could be doing more of this for our young people?
Yeah, I think you touch on a few things there that are really important. Public education, the outdoor education world. The biggest thing that I've seen in both categories, inside the public classroom as well as in the outdoors, is that every time the bell rings and you're transitioning from one classroom to the next, there's what we call these interstitial moments where people are building true bonds with each other and letting their guard down and having the flexibility and the creativity to express to one another about what's going on in their lives. And that's what gravitates us towards peer-to-peer relationships in a positive way. When we get to the deeper level of peer-to-peer relationships, drug abuse and alcohol abuse, suicide, if you have a peer that you can lean on, it gives you more reason to not do those things. If you have a peer that is at school and you want to be with that peer and your friend, you're going to go to school, which result in you maybe studying together, which is also going to result in higher graduation rates. And it's going to result in you becoming more of a well-rounded individual. So there's the curriculum, the credit side of things, but there's also the human side, the growth piece in each person's individuality. What I see, as far as they go, is to just do more of. I sit on a couple advisory boards, and there's No Child Left Inside. There's Outdoor Schools Washington, there's outdoor learning grants, there's iGrants for the outdoors. There are all these programs in the state of Washington that want to spend the majority of their time taking students outside. And just for one instance, outdoor learning grants last year had a couple $1 million they could give away to outdoor learning grants. When they did the application, something like 20 applications came through, but they were only able to serve maybe like 18 or 20 of the projects. So if we're saying No Child Left Inside, which administered 140 applications but only served 30, really there's this huge demand for a change in education or an enhancement in education, but that we don't have the resources or the funding to administer it. Even though there's a willingness to do it, we just don't have the financial resources to do it.
This question of funding has come up a few times, this theme, right? The infrastructural solutions that are required, right, to really address the needs of students. I'm curious, right, naming that as a challenge to manage? Are there other obstacles, when you say do more of, are there other obstacles to that? And how would we overcome those? Is it simple policy, legislation, and really thinking about these funding aspects? Or do you see other solutions to this problem?
Honestly, I want to give a shout out, great respect to Washington State, kind of leading the charge, the Principals Association, getting to be part of that employment. I really believe what we've done with the budget we have as a state is remarkable and covering so many aspects of special education and public education and the things that have to happen. But yeah, I mean, there's a limit financially as how far you can take things. And so, as tax-paying citizens have to realize that some categories are more important than others, there has to be a little bit for exploration. But I'll tell you one thing that I have noticed as a school board member is we're very, very weak around our approach to bonds and levies. I think that schools, for instance, if a school were to grow to 1,000 students, a nice round number, and you were to go out for a bond to expand your school's opportunity, you're only going to go ask that bond measured at 1,000 students. And what we have is that's the request you make, right, to your citizens, and they vote on it and the bond passes. What I wish the state and the federal government would realize is we need a forward moving approach. There needs to be like a 20% match or a 25% match in looking at these bonds, because by the time the bond is approved and the structure gets built, all of a sudden your student capacity went to 1,200. So you didn't account for growth in your communities, which is happening exponentially across the state of Washington. I mean, there's just a lot of growth, a lot of people moving here. So you built this structure to hold 1,000 students, but now you're going to cram an extra 200 kids in the classroom. That's not fair to teachers. That's not fair to students. That's not fair to community members and the administration having to decide who gets to go to school and who doesn't, because it's so crowded and packed. I think that approach is very important. We have an infrastructure issue in Washington State that needs a little bit of forward thinking and progress.
Well, and it highlights the disparities of some districts over others, depending on real estate, But what happens when a levy does not pass? And I read an article a few months ago about a smaller school district that hasn't been able to pass levies in years, and they don't have microscopes for the science class.
Or they're using stuff from the 90s or 80s or maybe earlier.
Yeah. And so
it's an issue.
I'm curious, from a rural school district, what have you learned or noticed about some of the approaches? Because, how many students are in Morton School District?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first started, we had about 280, 285 K through 12. And now we're pushing 430, 430, 440. A big piece of that is people can move into rural communities now with the advancements of Starlink, and they can work remotely. We found out a lot about that. Pre-pandemic, we were 300. Now we're, like I said, 430. We're 130 students more. We have oversized classes. We have expansion that needs to happen. Our bond keeps failing. It's really hard to get over this threshold of a vote. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's just more people are coming to the rural communities because they can work remotely.
Yeah, as even the world of work shifts, how do schools have to respond to that, right? I mean, outside of, preparing students for the jobs of the future, but what about the parents now whose kids are in school who are making decisions based on this freedom, right, of geography, and I can still work?
Well, and here's another factor to it, Vincent, that we've kind of seen a little bit. Someone from California who can sell their properties for millions of dollars and uproot to a small town where I'm from, but they're still making that salary base. It completely changes the demographic of who's living in your town, there can be some rather large disparities in income, which how is that going to affect your school, and your community and the way things cost? So if homes are starting to sell and be, going from $250,000 and now they're all of a sudden $500,000, and those people with jobs and longevity in our communities here can't even afford to work regular labor jobs because they can't afford it because the income disparities that have taken place. We're seeing that a little bit.
So, we've named some big things, some small things, relational things, I think. I'm curious if you had any call to action for our listeners, like what would that be?
Yeah, I think my biggest call to action was 2 years ago. I knew that there's this balance, the pendulum swings. And I think technology for a long time has been a good component. Here we are talking on tech, a good component for growth. But I also think that we get so distracted by the shiny lights that we forget that there's some practicality to the natural things in life, the things that have real meaning outside of tech, that kind of that fill your life, fill your cup up. So you say that I have real value in that. I don't think a lot of people look at movies or videos of mountains and have the same feeling of climbing to the top of a mountain. There's this expression of feeling that comes with an existence. So, call to action for me, my heart beats in the direction of more time outside, whether that's day use or long-term, like overnight experiences. I think nature preschool is one of the coolest things that's happening in Washington State. But if I had my focus anywhere, I think it's getting kids out, living, letting them get tangible, let their hands get dirty, let them feel the work that's being done around them. I think there's a lot of impact when your memory kind of strikes. I think you can think of it as well when you're out in the woods. You have that overwhelming sense where your senses are on fire because you're living it and breathing it. It's more memorable. They're probably some of the most exciting moments in one's life, but also a place where we naturally go to think, hey, I need that. I need that to relax and get refocused. So that's where my attention is at.
Really, our relationship to our land bases is what I hear, right? Because it's very human to me. It's very ancient, I think. There's something there for me. I'm curious, could you say more about nature preschool?
Yeah. A couple years ago, Aliza Yair, who's up north, she's part of E3 Washington. I sit on the board. It's environmental educators for the economy and for education and the environment. So those three components is really what we focus on. She's part of DCYF, Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And she was able to get funding through legislation passed to advance and develop nature preschool. So you see them shooting up all over the place, especially in Whatcom County, which that brings up a whole nother story about, our densely populated areas have a lot of people that are making movement and action where, the rural communities lack a little bit. But going back to that, it's the idea is that nature preschool is just spent outside. So your lesson plans are taken outside. Your kids are building resilience. They're figuring out a way to not only address the challenges of weather, but then also taking time to learn. There's just so much research on the benefits of kids getting to have that real life, day-to-day challenge of meeting what's in front of you.
I first went to Cispus Learning Center at 17 years old when I went to a leadership camp there. Came back every year and eventually worked and lived there. And I knew when I got married that I could give my children this place. And it was a huge part of my decision as to have a family. And my sons lived and grew up at Cispus Learning Center as little ones. And at 25, 26, 27, I knew it was probably one of the most kind of profound wisdoms that I actively knew I was living out to give my boys the natural world.
Yeah.
So they could wake up and just be on a nurse log, walking through a trail, going to the creek, climbing a tree. I mean, all of the aspects of being in relation to all the sticks they grabbed and all the ferns they chopped. Right?
Also the fear of night, right? Like things are spooky out there.
And I see them now, in their mid 20s. The twins are 24, the oldest is 26, and they return not only to the land, but Cispus specifically, this specific place.
Well, good.
One of them's about to be married, and his fiance coming out and is like, hey, I want to take you to this place of my childhood that means so much to me. And so I have witnessed and am so grateful for opportunity to have work in the natural world for myself, right? Even when I'd wake up, walk across the street, see a deer, at 7 a.m, and have a relation with it, have a relational experience. And that's my morning, right? And then I continue on and connect with all the learners, students and adults out there. I had not expected this conversation to go this way, but I find myself really reflecting on the really profound calm, the really profound exploration and time, breathing well. I think when I got to serve and work outside every day as part of my job.
Yeah.
Back to school. I'm curious, even for you and your experience. I'm wrapping up most of these interviews with this question that I find really fascinating in terms of those who choose to go in education and support education, looking back at your own experience. So how did your schooling experience impact you?
So I went to school at Onalaska High School, which is just a little bit further down the road. So I'm Lewis County, born and raised. I was fortunate to have a good class. My mom is of Korean descent, so it didn't look like all the other students. We were kind of low minority when it comes to Asian. We did have a few issues, but my experience in public education was fantastic. I had great peers, great relationships, which happened at outdoor school. That kind of carried the weight of our relationships going forward. And especially since we had moved from Adna school. And so in 6th grade, I was a new student and was found with these new students, had a serious bonding moment by doing outdoor school, which was a 4-H camp at the time. And that kind of just put everyone at ease, getting to know people. But that's why you're lucky when you go to a rural school, a small school, the kids know you slipped on your butt before you even arrive at school because it's such a small town. So I always felt very welcomed and blessed in my community. But I'll have to say my most memorable times in public education were the outdoor experiences, the traveling trips. And not sure if we just had a really good grant writer as some of our teachers were, but we did a lot of field trips and a lot of exploration. So I'm really proud of the school that I came from and really proud of the approach and the comfort that I felt within my community. So I'm very fortunate there.
Thank you. I'm curious, was sports part of any of that?
Yeah, I was big into sports and you can probably give some grace to that. People love sports, right? I did play football and was a track star. And so I guess it kind of came easy as far as being able to kind of blend in with particular groups of people. And sports was a helpful way of doing that. Yeah.
When you mentioned traveling, that's part of my memory of some of these trips were for track, and that's memory building as well.
Yeah. Like I said, it's the interstitial moments. Like, it's not the sport, it's the traveling on the bus. Honestly, going and having dinner with my teammates or my classmates, breaking bread, and please, thank you. That on a whole different level, those were some of my favorite memories, sitting around a table laughing over a meal. And yeah, I don't think all schools have that. I could definitely see issues with larger school districts where it's like the school bell rings, you don't know who's at your school, and you're just another one in the flow and in the mix. That's why I feel really lucky I was at a rural school. We didn't always have everything, that's for sure, but we got by.
Anything we missed from this conversation about the purpose of public education?
It's what, so what, now what? That continuation of always getting better. I think that Washington State has some fascinating individuals that are doing great big pieces. One particular person is the director of Association of Washington Student Leaders, James Lehman. Our predecessors, Susan and Marty Fortin Jr., just those people have made such big impacts. And James and I are fairly new. We're looking to make big impacts. And our belief kind of comes from a system that we're trying to serve every student. Every student can lead. We believe in every student. We just have to get them in the right place and kind of help them discover who they are and give them some of the tools that they need to be successful. And there's great people all over this state. We're doing some awesome things.
Well, thank you. And just for clarity, CISPUS is CISPUS.
That's correct.
I always have to spell it for folks.
It's pretty funny. We've served over 1 million people since we've been up here. It's just such a beautiful place. We keep making progress, and we want this place to stand for hundreds of years to come. So, and you're part of that story, and so is everybody else.
Well, CISPUS is certainly part of my story.
Mine too. I don't know. I'm going to keep getting white hair popping up everywhere, sticking around up here, but I'm sure loving it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chase. Thanks for making time.
Yeah, no problem. So come on up anytime. We'll hit the restart button.
Right on.
You're doing awesome things. Good things for kids.
That's all I really want to do in my life.
Isn't that the motto? Do all things good for kids. Hey, Vince, I appreciate you, man.
All right. Blessings. Thank you for making time. We'll be talking soon.
Talk soon. Bye.